Hey guys, here I am again back with another review for spooky season. I said I was going to review another classic movie, and today I am here to talk about the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, directed by Philip Kaufman, starring Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, and Veronica Cartwright. And this follows the invasion of this plant-like species who slowly infest the people of San Francisco and slowly strip them of their personality. And look, I'm not going to get too much more into it beyond that, at least for now. There are going to be spoilers, but I think the thing that was so great about this film, because this is one of those ones where I've been hearing about it for a while, and I just wanted to see it because some of my friends kept saying, "You're going to love this," and I watched it, and I was absolutely blown away by this film. I think this is one of the most intelligent horror movies I have ever seen in my life. I mean, this really is such a cerebral and special film, and I think one of the few remakes that kind of surpasses the original. Because I do love the 1956 original, but I think the 78 version is much more thoughtful, clever, tightly written and directed, and also much more bleak. Though I will give the original film that it does have better characterization, and I think that there's a lot more character development, and that's something I will get into with this one. But just from a technical standpoint, the direction from Philip Kaufman in this really grounds this world to such an extent that everything taking place within this story feels like it could plausibly happen. And I think that's some of the best tension that you can build in creating a world like that, because it's so palpable to what we experience in day-to-day life. In a situation like this could happen and we wouldn't even notice. And I think you can see from a thematic standpoint and, visually, all this stuff, I think you can see the influence this film has had on something like John Carpenter's The Thing, for example, which I think obviously makes the best usage of that type of plot. But I think the other thing that really grounds this movie as well is, of course, the realism within the dialogue, but also just certain interactions that are so humanistic that it would be hard-pressed to buy into this film had the interactions not have happened. There's a great scene between Leonard Nimoy and Brooke Adams in this, where he's essentially talking about her husband, who has been taken over by one of these creatures, plants so-called at this point, and he essentially asks her the question, since he's a psychologist, he's trying to break it down. He says to her, "The fact that you're saying this man isn't your husband, could this be rooted in some sort of realization that you don't want to be in this relationship and you're thinking you might want to leave?" And her answer, as simple as it is so staggering when she says, "I don't know." Because then it really puts it into perspective that this is such a humane sort of drama, and that there's a lot more going on underneath the surface than what it seems to be. And I absolutely love when movies do that, especially horror, when it can be as thought-provoking as something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But also, for most of this movie, going into it, I did not know what was going on. Just the way that they show certain characters reacting to things, like for a lot of the film, it really keeps you guessing as to who's being taken over by this invasive species. And I think that's what I absolutely love about it, is sort of the emptiness that a lot of these actors portray in their characters. It's in the subtleties between being human and being taken over by this organism is really, really brilliantly laid out, but not spelled out for you. And that's what I love about this film. It never talks down to the audience. It's told so visually by Kaufman's direction. Of course, the legendary DP Michael Chapman cinematography. My goodness, just the way like he casts shadows onto buildings, the way he uses the camera in a very, very creative and almost handheld way through a lot of it. You can see how this would later lead him to doing the Copa shot. I know I bring that up all the time, but really the camera work is so innovative here that I wish it was nominated for Best Cinematography, because it absolutely should have been. And the way that the color just pops out in this film as well. I think it's so beautiful in that sense. And the amazing score by Denny Zeitlin as well really adds to the underlying sense of paranoia and dread that's moving throughout San Francisco as these organisms take over these people's bodies. It's just absolutely amazing, the work from a technical standpoint all across this film. But also the screenplay here, as I said, the way it sets up this world, it creates some of the best intrigue I have ever seen in any horror film, any science fiction film, and I think this is one of the perfect meldings between the two. Speaking of the visual storytelling, there's a great scene later in the film where Donald Sutherland and Brooke Adams' character are just walking down the street amidst all these, people who have been taken over by these organisms, and you just see them following their feet, and you see the feet of the other people as well, and it's such a beautiful scene because it visually tells a story and creates tension in this environment where they know they're the only ones there, as well as the audience being let in on that fact as well. I absolutely love direction like that in this film, but also the ideas this film presents about conformity. Because look, I mean, the 1956 original, a lot of people think it's about McCarthyism. It's not. Really, more than anything, the filmmakers were just trying to get across the idea of people kind of losing their humanity and the importance of love, which was the intention of the original Jack Finney novel, to my understanding. But here I think they tap into something a bit more deeper, which I think is really solidified by the amazing ending to this film, which I will discuss and get into. But it really does bring up that question. And I think certainly for the time, this was after Watergate, all this stuff, it kind of presents the idea of just going on with our lives, becoming a cog in the machine, so-called, and not having any sort of sense of individuality. And I think that's what this film captures so beautifully throughout the arcs of these characters and the disillusion of their eventual being, which I think is just so brilliant. And the practical effect work in this film is incredible as well, especially when we see the pods for the first time and they're creating like the duplicate of Donald Sutherland's character. It's just so realistic and unnerving, and I absolutely love that about that. And of course, I mean, everyone who has seen this movie knows the iconic dog and man hybrid of the musician who's playing on the street and his dog. It's so iconic. It's been replicated in so many other things. That's another reason why this is such an influential sci-fi horror classic. I was just watching the English dub of the anime Ghost Stories of all things, and there's a dog in that show that is just like the one in here, and it kind of clicked. I was like, oh shit, they stole that from Body Snatchers, which is kind of incredible in a lot of ways, and I just love seeing that type of influence pop up in other forms of media. But of course, the cast here is what really sells it. Donald Sutherland, one of his best performances. Brooke Adams, just their relationship too. I love how this film, essentially, one of the underlying stories going on with the characters, it's these two are really realizing that they actually love each other. They work together in the lab, and they obviously have this connection, and that plays into the plot thread of her kind of realizing she wasn't meant for this marriage, or that her marriage isn't working out. The relationship between Elizabeth and Matthew, I think, is really the heart of the movie. But also, I love Veronica Cartwright, and of course, the ever so amazing Jeff Goldblum, in one of his first big roles, because he was in Annie Hall the year before. and here he is, and you get such a great comedic timing from Jeff Goldblum, especially with all his interactions with Leonard Nimoy's character, or his lack of, his aversion to him. I absolutely love what they do, and poor Veronica Cartwright can never catch a break in any of the science fiction films she's been in, of course Alien the next year, but she's actually tremendous, the work she does in this film when she is used on screen. But these four, trying to figure out what is going on with these pods and these, duplicates of them, I think that's where the interesting discussion comes in, because it offers a lot to chew on and really sit with and think about, especially when they're like saying, if you fall asleep, you would never know the difference if you were taken over, and all of a sudden, bam, there goes your entire humanity. And I think that's a really, really profound and striking idea, just the fact that something so essential to life for most people being taken away just like that. And that's what I absolutely love about this film and what it presents, especially with that ending that I have to talk about. My goodness, it really nails the whole idea home, because another thing that's so brilliant about, for most of the movie, you don't really know after they cut away if Matthew has been taken over, and you just see him doing his job day in and day out. You see him looking around, and then there's that amazing reveal when Veronica Cartwright shows up at the end, and he lets out that blood-curdling scream and is pointing his finger, and it's all over, which is just one of the most iconic horror endings of all time, and really puts the nail in the coffin that, there's essentially the inevitability of just becoming this soulless part of the capitalistic machine. I think it's just such a profound ending that still implications haunt us to this day and still remain relevant all these years later. It really is just an absolutely brilliant, thought-provoking science fiction film that I don't think we get enough of nowadays, because yet again, it just has so much going from it. From a directorial standpoint, from a visual standpoint, from a writing standpoint, from an acting standpoint. There's not much you can knock, though I will say, of course, and this obviously is a problem with the original film as well, even though there's other problems with the original, like the ending, which is why I like this one so much more here, because it was actually made by a creative person and not the studio. But, of course, the scene where Matthew leaves Elizabeth to check on the ships, and of course, knowing damn well that she's on the verge of falling asleep, and he leaves her anyway, I'm not upset about it too much, because what they built up to with the ensuing scene where he's, trying to bring down the whole pod housing facility, and what they do, just watching her crumble in his arms, it's just the practical work, once again, I cannot be commended enough. But I think in a film that's full of so many smart decisions made by smart characters, that one seems a little less smart. And yet again, it's what the film builds to that really kind of lets me be okay with the fact that something like that happened, but also the fact that as much as there is moving threads for these characters that a lot of people can really relate to, I just don't think that there's a whole lot of character development with our four leads. And that was a bit of a disappointment, because yet again, that's something I think the 50s version does a lot better. And it is what it is, because yet again, I think the characterizations are strong enough as is that you can buy into it. Also, Robert Duvall shows up as a priest swinging on a swing next to kids, which was really disturbing. But yet again, just the tiny little tidbit I love about this film. But yet again, if I didn't feel so enthralled by this movie, I probably wouldn't be talking about it, because for most of the movie I was thinking it was maybe top 10 horror films of all time. I wouldn't quite put it there, but it's certainly one of the greatest remakes of all time and one of the greatest films in the sci-fi horror genre, and I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. An absolute classic film to the highest degree. You absolutely have to check it out if you haven't seen it already. And check out the 1956 version as well, which is also great in its own right, like I said. But this is just something that I figured I'd come on here and talk about, just because the experience of watching this movie for the first time, the intrigue, everything about it. Hopefully I didn't ruin that for you either, but you know, I just had such a wonderful experience watching this film, and I just wanted to talk about it and share my thoughts on it with you guys. So of course, let me know what you think about the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, as well as the 56 one, as well as the other ones that they've made, which I hear aren't as good. Let me know in the comments below, and of course smash the like button if you like what I'm doing here. Maybe there will be more reviews, classic reviews for this time of year, I'm not sure. But one thing I can assure you is there's going to be a couple of movie reviews for movies coming out this week that I will get to, one of which being the Palme d'Or winner, Anatomy of a Fall. So please stay on the lookout for that. I cannot wait to see that movie in the next few days here and share my thoughts on it with you guys. And of course, as always, thank you for tuning into the channel. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take it easy.